welcome to Ed, a podcast about the teaching life. This is Check-In 37, and I'm your host, Shane Lawrence. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. And before we get going, I've got some great news. We are doing a live show on February 7th. We're going to be recording at the NCTCA conference. If you are a teacher in that part of the world, would love to see you there. It's going to be at CKUA, February 7th at 10 o'clock. There's going to be snacks, there's going to be prizes, we're going to be talking about podcasting as PD, and of course we're going to be doing a live check-in with audience participation. So if you're going to be at NCTCA, would love to see you there. And this month, I am joined by absolutely nobody. So this is it. This is me. This is what I figured would happen eventually, is I'm going to be sitting in a dark room by myself talking into a can. And well, here it is. It's finally happened after 4.5 years. This might be a bit of a short one, and we'll find out. But it's still going to have all the same stuff that you've come to expect from a check-in. There's going to be wins and fails. There's going to be our main topic. And we'll waltz on out of here with a timeout. So first up, wins and fails. And this past month, I had a win. And I'm pretty proud of this one because I've got a student in my class, and this person is challenging. And it's one of these students that just can't seem to connect to, and has sort of devolved to the point where you just sort of tolerate their presence in the class, and you just kind of hope they don't cause too much mayhem while they're there. And but earlier in the month, a couple of weeks ago, somehow we got into a conversation when I was touching base with this person, and found out that they like cars. And I used to be really into cars, not so much anymore, but I still, appreciate the art form, if you will. But found out that he did, and so we just had this conversation for I'm going to say about 10 minutes or so, just talking about the kind of cars that he likes, finding out that he works on cars with his dad. And I mean, this is apropos of a whole bunch of conflict before then. And it was just so cool to connect with him. It felt like, all right, yeah, I'm finally building this bridge. And I mean, other students were, they were kind of doing their thing already. They were kind of on autopilot. So I had the time to actually really dig into it and just sort of talk about engines and cars and wheels and acceleration times and all this kind of stuff. And it was awesome. So that was definitely a win for me. And speaking of wins, getting into my topic now, I'm not going to say this is a win necessarily, but what I want to talk about this month is challenging yourself in particular. We always tend to focus on how we challenge our students, but I've been kind of taken aback lately just through conversations I've been having, through some books I've been reading, articles, and realizing that a lot of what I ask my students to do, I don't do myself very often. Students will encounter an obstacle and they give up, and I will harangue them, I will poke them, prod them, I will do whatever it is to help them get past that obstacle. And often it usually is paired up with something like, why are you having this problem? What's the deal? This is not that hard. But then recognizing in my own practice, and not just teaching practice, the practice of my own personal life, there's a lot of times where I come up against obstacles and I do the same thing. I back off the moment I find something that's hard, and I say, well, I don't have time for it, or that's just too difficult, so I'll just try something else. I mean, I'm a person of a million interests, so it's not hard for me to switch tasks and find something else that isn't as challenging and yields more rewards. So I suddenly had this kind of moment in class one day where I was with a student and just, getting after them for giving up so easily, and realizing, yeah, I need to stop giving up so easy. I need to do things that are hard, that don't yield results immediately, that require repetition, that require tenacity and resilience. That word resilience, do I have that? And honestly, the one thing that's got me thinking on that is, this sounds super dorky, but I took up the ukulele last May, sort of as a stress thing. I was going through a really stressful time at school, and every May is a stressful time at school. And so I just picked up the ukulele because I'd always wanted to learn to play it. And lo and behold, I loved it. I still love it. I'm literally holding a ukulele right now in my hands because I might find an opportune moment here to play something to perhaps demonstrate what I'm talking about, but maybe not. Maybe you'll get lucky. You won't have to listen to my horrible plunking. But realizing that in the last, almost year that I've been playing it now, and I play it every day, I've realized that a lot of times what I do is I'll go and I'll learn a song to a certain extent, to the point where it's kind of like, okay, I've got the chords, I got the progression, on to the next thing, rather than taking the time to step back and really refine it and make it so that I can actually play a song all the way through, right? And really add that layer of polish. And I mean, I ask this of my students. I want them to try something and then fail at it and then try it again and refine and get better and better and better at something. And that does require a lot of stick-to-itness, tenacity, resilience. Those all mean the same thing. But here I am, again, I will pick something up, learn it really basically, then move on and learn something else really basically. And even though I'm maybe learning new chord progressions or I'm learning new chords, I'm not really getting any better, other than I'm just getting good at rearranging things. And I mean, maybe there's times we do that with our students too, where, coming from my background as an English teacher, where we ask them to write something and it's kind of okay, and then we change up the format so they get kind of okay at that, and then we change the format again and they get okay at that, rather than saying, no, let's take one piece of writing and let's get better than just let's improve our skills beyond the point where we can just kind of put words in the right order and make sentences and say a couple of things. Let's really challenge them to dig in and get better and make it more professional. I mean, that's the difference, right? That's the difference between an amateur and professional. There's the difference between a beginner and a novice, maybe even intermediate, expert. It's not that big. No, it's huge. The difference between them is huge, but it doesn't take long to bridge those gaps. But then that difference between being good at something and being excellent at something, that last 5%, that's where the professionals have to put their time in. That's where we as teachers have to put our time in, is that last 5% to really dig into what it is we're doing and make it better. And I know the teachers who do that, they work hard at it to get that last little polish, because we're all at that level where I'm sure most of us, we're doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. I'll bet you're doing pretty good too. But to get to that last 5%, that's what requires the resilience. And that's what we're trying to build into our kids. So, I mean, for example, right now, I am decided I'm going to learn Blackbird on a ukulele. I know, it's weird. But I have literally played this over and over and over and over and over just to get that. And it's still not perfect, and it's out of tune, and that's because my ukulele is garbage. But that's the kind of resilience that I need to have right now in order to bridge that 5% to get really good at this song and improve the skills that I need to be a better player. So that's all well and good for this thing off on the side. But what do I do on a daily basis to get better at my teaching? And hey, you got to stop partway through here because we've got ads. We got sponsors. We got the ECF, the Edmonton Community Foundation, and they have a show called the Well Endowed Podcast. And that's a show that highlights all the work that the ECF does as they help bridge the gap between donors and charitable causes. So on their latest episode of their Well Endowed Podcast, Chris Chang-Yen Phillips speaks with Edmonton Community Foundation CEO Martin Garber-Conrad about the history of our home at Hilltop House. And then Hunter Cardinal joins them to discuss his new play, Lake of the Strangers, and the process of working with community to create new myths. So you can listen to that and all their other episodes at thewellendowedpodcast.com. And that's a production of the Edmonton Community Foundation. So that's all well and good for this thing off on the side. But what do I do on a daily basis to get better at my teaching? I know that I do a lot of work in this podcast. I talk to people, but that's kind of the equivalent of learning a little snippet of a song and then moving on. Because there's so many songs to learn. There's so many great educators out there to talk to, and they've all got their own thing. So maybe what I'm arriving at here is just the idea that rather than hopping from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. I mean, I'm going to keep on having these conversations with all these great educators. I love learning about what other people are doing. But as an educator, finding out what it is that you love, like what's your professional, what's your educational ukulele? What's the thing that you just want to pick up and just get better at and just deepen? And honestly, I'm not going to lie. I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm still trying to, because again, my mind is wired to just hop to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. Like I'm pretty sure my spirit animal must be a squirrel, because I'm constantly distracted and I like to move from one thing to the next, but I need to find that one thing that's just like, what do I want to grab onto and stick with? And it's not going to be easy because I'm still going to be distracted. That's not going to go away. But what is it that we're going to grab onto and say, yeah, this is it. This is going to make me a better teacher. And it doesn't mean you have to dwell on that for the rest of your career. At least I hope it doesn't. I don't think I possess the personal fortitude to do that for another 20 years. But what's that one thing? And I know there's teachers out there who are like that, who've got that one thing and they've honed it and focused it, and then that suffuses into their professional practice. And I'm proud of you and I'm jealous of you, and you know who you are. But going forward, maybe you're thinking that, getting to that point of deep understanding, of high polish in that one area, maybe that's going to be a hard thing for you. It's a hard thing for me. So going forward, that's what I want to focus on is trying to stick with one thing for a little while and getting really good at it. And that's the challenge, challenging myself to honestly put some blinders on. We think of that as a negative thing, but for me, I know it's not. Put some blinders on, stay focused, and do one thing really, really well, because I know that's going to benefit my kids and it's going to benefit me in the long run, because in addition to whatever skill it is that I'm focusing on and challenging myself with to get better at, once I've got that mastered, it's just part of me. It's part of my practice. And then I can move on and find something else that can add on to it or complement it. But challenge is what I want to do. I want to challenge myself. Maybe that should be my hashtag one word 2019. There's my thoughts. I did it. I made it. I told you it was going to be a short check-in, but hey, it's just me. And, I bring other people on the show to make me look shiny. So instead, here I am, toughing it out. Seeing if 4.5 years of podcasting has made me capable of talking into a can on my own and remain somewhat compelling. I don't know. You can tell me. Tweet at me. Let me know. So I'm going to tell you about my timeout. I had a month of good timeouts this month. Watched some great movies. I've really been dedicating myself to just finding little tiny moments, and I'll watch, a 2-hour film over the course of a week and a half in 20-minute installments, because that's the way my life is right now. But funny thing is, my timeout this month is an audiobook. My wife subscribed to Audible, and then we kind of forgot that we had it. So we got those monthly credits stacking up, and suddenly realized like we're not really using this. So I just got a whole whack of books and then canceled Audible. So this podcast not brought to you by Audible, obviously. But nonetheless, I'm left now with a big pile of really great books. So I read, listened, heard one, but it's by one of my favorite authors, Chuck Klosterman, and it's called "But What If We're Wrong?" Thinking about the present as if it were the past. And he goes into several different areas of culture, but trying to think about, what's going to last, what's going to still be there in 500 years, which bands are we going to be talking about, or how are we going to be, what if we're thinking about science completely wrong? What's it going to look like in 500 years? And it's just a really great meditation on perspectives and socially constructed thinking. And it's fantastic. So I got an Audible, but of course I'm sure you can get it anywhere. But it's called "But What If We're Wrong?" And as long as, we're on this kick, anything by Chuck Klosterman really is always interesting, even if you don't agree with some of the things he says. And he writes a lot about classic rock sometimes, and that doesn't really float my boat, but maybe it floats yours. So it's worth a read. That's it. This is going to be one of the shortest check-ins ever. But I think, I've done the best I can. I've challenged myself by doing this on my own, and hopefully it has turned out. You can tell me. So I made it. I did it. I did my very own podcast all by myself, and that was with the help of the Alberta Podcast Network. It's a network of Alberta-made podcasts that cover all topics imaginable, including one of my favorite shows, That's a Thing. It's a podcast in which Elizabeth, who is a teen, explains her media to Karen, who's her mom. They're going to be recording a live episode on March 17th, which is why I'm giving them the big shout out for this one, at the Skirts of Fire Festival. They're going to explore how the internet has created a supportive and informative space for LGBTQ plus youth, notwithstanding the trollish toxicity we all seem to be swimming in online. If you want to learn more about that, I've mashed down the enormous long URL into bit.ly/that'sathing, which will take you to the page. You can learn more about that. And this is only one show that is a part of the amazing Alberta Podcast Network. And if you want to listen to any of the other shows, cover topics like sports, comedy, and food, and education, you can check them out at albertapodcastnetwork.com. And if you're still with me, you want to be a guest on the show, you can email me, theedpodcast@gmail.com, or hit me up on Twitter at theedpodcast. And if you want to listen to more of this, you can head over to the website, theedpodcast.podbean.com, or find us on Apple Podcast or Stitcher or any other podcatcher of your choice. Just search up Ed Conversations. Ed can also be heard on Voice Ed Radio, which is 24-hour internet broadcasting devoted to the best ideas in education. Just head over to voiced.ca. So, on behalf of me and nobody else, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.